Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight for our lecture series. My name's Kevin Euler, and I'm a member of the Spanish Fork Historic Preservation Commission. Happy to have all of you join us tonight for our lecture. Our guest speaker tonight is Valerie Atkisson de Mora. And before we get started, I just want to remind everyone to please hold any questions that you have to the end of the presentation. Valerie moved to Spanish Fork almost 3 years ago from Centennial, Colorado. She grew up mostly in the Midwest, having moved 8 times by the time she graduated from high school. She didn't know where she was from, but knew who she was from. She has showed her artwork in numerous galleries and museums in New York City while living there for 10 years, as well as extensively in Utah. Valerie received her MFA in 1998 at the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, New York. She received her BFA in 1996 in painting at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. Valerie has received many grants and awards, including the Rima Hort Mann Foundation grant. Her bibliography is extensive, and featured publications include Latter-day Saint Art, a Critical Reader, published by Oxford University Press, Artful, BYU TV Season 5, in this year alone. In past years, a few articles in the New York Times, BYU Studies, Exponent 2, American Artist Magazine, Queen's Gazette, Deseret News, and Detroit Free Press. Valerie currently teaches as an adjunct professor at Utah Valley University and was a visiting professor at BYU. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Valerie Atkisson de Mora.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight and to talk about my work. Thank you for the introduction. As he said, that when I moved to New York City to get my MFA at the School of Visual Arts, everyone would ask everyone where they're from, and I wasn't really from anywhere. I kind of moved around a lot in the Midwest, but I didn't have a landscape that I was from, and not like a place, a house, a location. But I knew who I was from. I knew my grandparents. I knew who my great-grandparents were. I didn't know them personally, but I knew the names of and where my great-great-grandparents were from. And I realized that was something that was a little unique about myself. And the reason is because my parents, when we moved around so much, they really wanted to ground us somewhere, and so they taught us a lot. They told us stories about our ancestors, and we would travel. When we traveled, we'd usually end up at an ancestor's home or a grave, of a great-great-grandparent or something. And so I was very familiar with landscapes, even around the world, of where my ancestors were from. So after the first year of my graduate program, I decided that I was going to make a self-portrait. And I knew that there was a big depository of ancestral information on what was called Ancestral File at the time. This is back in 1997, 96. And I could access that. And so I decided to put my name in there, and I was going to write on the wall of my studio my pedigree chart, who I was from. And this would make up a self-portrait for me, the shape of that, the known information. And so I thought, well, I'll just go there, I'll download this information, print it out, and it'll take me a weekend. Well, to my surprise, it took me the entire summer because there was so much information on there. I was very surprised. I knew a lot of ancestral work had been done on my family, but I was really shocked the amount, the thousands of names. And so that summer on the walls of my studio, I wrote all of these names out. The summer after I graduated from the School of Visual Arts, I was asked to recreate this work called Family History Wall on the walls of Artist Space, which is a nonprofit studio, gallery in Soho. And so this is an installation view of this piece. I wonder if I have a cursor. I guess the cursor is going to be able to show you what I'm talking about. So around this corner is where it starts. I don't have a picture of that. But here on this wall, so it goes around the wall facing it starts on the wall here that is on the same plane, but it is divided by this little wall here. Does that make sense? And then is on the back side of this wall, then curves around here, goes around here to the end of the wall, and then is on the next wall and the next wall facing here. So it covers 72 feet because each generation takes up 12 inches of space. And the generations are in one column. So here, this generation is about 1,200. And then it goes back into time. So here's a detail, and what was really affected me was the overwhelming amount of information. So to communicate that to the viewer, I wanted to have the writing go over everything. So here it's going over pipes, it's going over the in case of fire, the alarm, and even onto the floor when I didn't have enough room. And as you can see, there are lines here. So I didn't want to repeat the people. As you know, as many people know, in family history, sometimes cousins will marry each other, or fourth or fifth or eighth or 10th cousins, people that don't even know they're related. Well, that happens. And so I would go back, and then I would realize, okay, I've seen this person before, and this is a repeat. And so I would stop there because I didn't want to put people on the wall multiple times. So where that line stopped, starting from the patriarchal line going back, I would come back to the next one and go out. And then these were organized in columns. So there is a line going from the parent or the child of some parents to their parents on the wall in a different place if they're already on the wall. And sometimes that skips several generations because of the different way life turns out, I guess you could say. I don't know. But so there are lines going to the people who are on there multiple times or just once, right? So that's a little explanation of that. So this piece, I was there for 3 weeks installing this, and that's pretty much how long it was up. And people would come in, and I would have conversations with them about what I was doing, and a lot of times they would talk to me about their own family history. And so it was a really neat exchange of telling my story and them telling their stories. This is at the Bronx Museum of the Arts, and this is also an installation. And this is my matriarchal line. So I wanted to add images, landscapes, portraits, and anecdotal images of stories to the names, because the names tell a story in themselves, but the people also had a life and were in color. Does that make sense? So I wanted to add color to this and more story. So this is a little me. Down here at the bottom, you can see the socket. I'm looking up, as in back into time, and crouching down, looking forward into time. And this goes back to my grandmother. This is a picture of her when she was little, and that's a wedding picture of her. There's a chicken there on a swing. That was one of her friends and pets, who was named Clara Kimball Young, and that was the name of this chicken. And the chicken would be on the swing in their basement, and she would play with this chicken, and that was a story that I thought was amazing. So I included that. Her mother is in the blue. I don't have a picture of that one. And her grandmother is pictured here. She, when she was a girl, worked feeding the people who were working on the railroad in Utah. And that was part of what her family did. She was married, and they lived in Franklin, Idaho. They built a log cabin there. And some of the stories that I heard about my family involved polygamy because they are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And at that time, 100 plus years ago, some of the members did practice polygamy, and that was in my family. That was something that I didn't understand and had a hard time reconciling. So part of the reason why I was interested in my family history was to understand them. So they had a cabin, and her husband decided that he wanted to marry a second wife, and she did not agree. So they got a divorce, and then he built this beautiful new house on the land right in front of her log cabin, and that's where he and his new wife moved in, and she stayed in the log cabin there for the rest of her life. So these are stories that really fascinated me, and so I really was trying to see what this was all about. The other thing that I did here was I put flowers with every woman, and they're symbolic of the children that they had. So this is my fourth great grandmother, I believe it's fourth, and she had then 5 girls and 4 boys. So she had 9 children. The blue flowers are representing boys, and the red flowers are representing girls. Okay, we've already seen that. After I did that piece, I did a piece, this was at the Dumbo Art Center down under the Manhattan Bridge overpass. That's an acronym, Dumbo Art Center. And this is a portrayal of my patriarchal line. My matriarchal line goes back what we know of 10 generations, and I would put the images of them if I had them, and if I didn't, then I would put the landscapes, or maybe I'd put an image in there of them. So this is the little me looking up at my father's line. So here's my dad. He was born in Florida, and his dad was an accountant and used the very early computers in the when was that? I don't know, the 40s, I think, 40s and 50s to do accounting. These are huge mainframes that probably do what our phone can't even do what our phone did, basically. And then these are his parents came from the South, from Tennessee. This is his I think it's his father, and then this is his grandfather. And at this point, they are in Tennessee, and this is right after the Civil War. And this is my third great-grandfather, who took my second great-grandfather, who was a boy at the time, to one of the battlefields. And he talked about seeing the bodies of the people, of the soldiers there that were that had died. And he talked to his son about the evils of war and how it was such a terrible thing. And he was a pharmacist, and he was a tobacco farmer, and he owned slaves, which was something I don't really recall knowing a whole lot maybe I heard about when I was growing up, but at this time in my life, it was something that was pretty appalling to me and that I was ashamed of. But that's something that happened in my family. But like all of these pieces, I was really interested in the truth of what was going on, not necessarily trying to judge myself or them, but what happened. Oops. So there's me looking up. Here's a close-up of the battlefield as I imagined it. This is when they were pharmacists, kind of / doctors. He was also a Presbyterian minister. And in the will, it is the names of this woman and her small son and baby were mentioned. And they were passed down from the Louis Atkisson, who is the first Atkisson we can find in the United States. We haven't been able to trace that line definitively out of Virginia, where they came. So this story here is about Louis, and he was working for the landowner, and he fell in love with the daughter named Judith Clark. And he asked the landowner if he could marry Judith, and he said no. And so Louis was so mad about this that he jumped over them while they were eating dinner with his horse. I don't know how that happened, but this is how it happened in my mind. He was also a shoemaker, which is why there are shoe things here. And he went and married another woman, and that woman died in childbirth with their first child. This is something that happened to 4 successive generations in this patriarchal line. Their first wife died in childbirth with their first child. Childbirth at this time was something that was very scary and life-threatening. So we are very fortunate these days. But so that since that happened, he went back and he married Judith. And so I come from Judith Clark and Louis Atkisson. I wanted to make a way that was a little more permanent. The pieces that you've seen were painted over. They're installation art. It's something that's temporary, and I have photography of it, but they don't exist anymore. So I was thinking about how could I make these this family history wall, the bones of these people, visually and have it a little more permanent. So I discovered a way, and that was to make each person's write each person's vital information on a triangle that I made out of copper wire, like a copper wire armature. And then I folded rice paper around it and then wrote on the rice paper. And the reason why I used a triangle is because it can bear weight. It's weight bearing. And there's one person, there's 2 ends that come off that person. So I wired in the next triangle, that person's parents into them, and then those person's parents into them, and then going on and on. So this is a 3-dimensional representation of that family history wall, and it also serves as a self-portrait for myself. So these are the known people that make me up physically. I also made a second one, in case that wasn't enough work. I made a second one that is called family history, hanging family history, matriarchally oriented. And as I had been doing the family history wall and the other sculpture, I realized that as I went out on the patriarchal line and then came back and got the next line and out like this, it was kind of like this swinging motion. And since there was so much intermarrying with the people that I had records of, I realized that had I started at the matriarchal line and gone up this way, it would look different because the people would be in different places. Not that it's a different, I guess the meaning of what I'm saying is just what I said. It's the same people, they're just arranged differently, and so it would look different. So I want it, and it does look different. So that was what the purpose was of making this second piece. So this one's matriarchal line, patriarchally oriented. This one is matriarchal line, matriarchally oriented. So here you can see that's me at the top, that first triangle. I have 2 triangles coming off of me, which are my parents, and then 4 off of them. It grows exponentially until either the information is not known or it repeats. So everyone is just on here one time. Here's another close-up of the handwriting. And what I have is the name, their name, their birth date and birthplace, and death date and death place, if it's known. And then it goes back to 9 AD, and here it is on the ground. And installation art oftentimes is kind of goes around you or is somehow related to you as a person, as a viewer, as your body. So this, in installation art, I like to make people like crouch down and look at things, or like get up on their tippy toes and look at things, so that they are involved in the piece. And this is the very bottom, going back to 9 AD. After this, I got a grant from the Rima Hort Mann Foundation, and this enabled me to go to Norway and investigate this family branch that came from there. So this piece, in culmination of that, I painted this piece on the stairwell, or the ramp of the Queen's Museum of Art. So this piece is 80 feet long and 30 feet high, and it was also completed in 3 weeks. And it is about my Norwegian line. So it begins, I think I want to go to the beginning. Okay, yeah. So it begins with my great-grandmother. This is Ragna Johnson Mon, and she grew up in Logan, but she was born in Alta, Norway, which is in the Arctic Circle. And no, she wasn't born there. No, maybe she was. She was either born in Trondheim or in Alta. I'm actually not sure which one she was born in. But anyway, so, and then when she was about 5 or 6, they immigrated to the U.S. and settled in Logan. So we see here a little bit of the plains coming across, and then she took a train up to Logan. So she came in after the train was going. Let's go. This is, that's a little portrait of her and her father, who was named Peter Johnson, and he was from Trondheim, Norway. One of the farthest ancestors of this group came from Denmark in, I think, around maybe the 14 or 1500s. And then they settled at the Skjervøy Mountains, which are pictured here. This is at the entrance of the museum. And here's Petra. That's a very large picture of her. And Petra was the mother of Ragna, who we saw earlier, who was the little girl, okay? So Petra Omen was her name, was from Alta, Norway, which is in the Arctic Circle. And so I was able to go to these places and do some research and do watercolors, even in the midnight sun. I was there in June, and so I was trying to figure out how to structure my day, and I was thinking I need to research, then I need to do I need to paint before the sun goes down, and the sun doesn't go down. It just circles around the sky. So I was literally watercoloring at 3 a.m., which was really cool. Here are some areas and landscapes of where some of their ancestors were from. and then this is their daughter Ragna. Peter Johnson's father was a shoemaker, and he had to move to Trondheim, had to move his family to Trondheim. They were living on a little island of Uteroya, and they had to leave because they had joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the people on the island didn't want them there anymore. And so they took their home down board by board, put it on a boat, moved to Trondheim and the city, and built it back up. And there he was a shoemaker. And so these types of stories were what was intriguing me. I just could imagine that someone would do that, take their house down board by board and sail it. But that's how you move in Norway. That's when I went there. It's like there's fjords, and that's the easiest way to get around. So it's interesting what you find out. So that was his father, who was the shoemaker. And then she grew up and lived in Logan for the most of her life. Now, what I found out later was, by looking through some of her letters that she wrote, she actually went to I want to go back a little bit. She went to the World's Fair in New York City in the 60s. And that's when the Queen's Museum of Art was built, at the World's Fair site. So I just think it's so amazing that at the time I didn't know this, that I was doing this mural about her ancestries, and she was even on here, and she likely had been in this or seen this museum, which was pretty incredible. How would she know that her great granddaughter would be painting a big mural on the wall? It's kind of interesting. So here we go onward to, I did a exhibition at the BYU Museum of Art in the year, I think it was around 2002. Here's one of my hanging family history, patriarchally oriented. And I did this, many of the people on that sculpture come from my father's line, which is part of the Tanner line, which is a prominent family here in Utah. And so I was interested in that family. And so I did this whole installation show about them. So it's my great-grandfather, Henry S. Tanner, and his wife, Laura Loretta Woodland. So you can see, sorry, I get confused as far as I should go up or down. So that's a little me looking up at my great-grandmother, Laura Loretta Woodland. And she was one of the first Utah State legislators. That was a woman. She was in the Utah State Legislature in the 1920s. And she passed a kindergarten bill, which was very interesting to me, as she was also the first of his 4 wives that he took. And he started polygamy 10 years after the manifesto. So this was something that was not looked on well. And he was actually also the lawyer for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so he, after he went to law school at University of Michigan, and his wife was there with him, they were married for 10 years, and then they returned to Utah, and that's when he started polygamy. He was outed at a meeting saying that he had he was practicing polygamy. I think he was on like the mutual board or something like that. And one of the women that he married, her former boyfriend that wanted to marry him, outed him basically. So he lost his job, and he continued mining law, and he married 4 women. And this is also the other reason why I'm very interested in this family, is because I don't understand these decisions, but I began to learn a lot. So about him, So Henry S. Tanner was born in Payson, Utah, to Joseph Smith Tanner, and before he was 14, he lost 4 siblings and his mother. His father, this is a picture of his father, married his housekeeper, and then another wife. And at that point, he left. He'd had enough, and he went to join the Army. And so he went to join the Army. He was laying at home one night, or in his tent, and his mother's voice came to him and said, "Henry, be a good boy," or something like this. And so he decided to go back to school. He went to school in Logan, and this is where he met Laura Loretta Woodland, who lived in near Malad, Idaho. So there, I did this piece on parchment, which is goat skin. And there's a long history of using goat skin to make records, like illuminated manuscripts and things. So it's gouache on goat skin, and then there's ink. The people that are, this is a close-up of that. People that are here are the descendants of this first wife on this first one, and then on the second one too. They apparently didn't believe that polygamy should be continued, but they felt like they were called to do it. So their children didn't practice it, but they had lots of children. And this is the kind of landscape and stories of Laura Loretta Woodland's life. And then this is the second wife, Columbia. And those are her descendants. And this is the third wife. And the fourth wife didn't have any children. At this time, he would practice law at the Salt Lake courthouse, and she was a stenographer. And she was pregnant once, and it says in stenography, because this is a little bit of a family lore, maybe she was pushed. That's, someone from something, I don't know. She was pushed down the stairs. She lost her baby when she fell down the stairs. So that was something I was very intrigued by. And in contemporary art, at least with my contemporary art, the medium I use is what I feel like is going to communicate very clearly what I want to communicate. So I decided to use parchment because of a few things. The name is Tanner of the family, so that's what a Tanner does. And also, in order to make this artwork, there was a sacrifice. There was an animal sacrifice for this skin. And if I felt like, for what the study that I did about Henry S. Tanner was that he sacrificed pretty much everything in his life for this principle of polygamy, his job, his reputation, his family, ostracization, things like this. Meanwhile, his first wife was elected a Utah state legislator. So it's like there's so many contradictions about family and what that means, and what you do for family. So these are my attempts to understand. I did a piece. This is also at the Dumbo Art Center, and this is on again rice paper. This is watercolor on rice paper, and this is called Radial Family History. So these are the ancestors of my parents. My mom's side is on the right, my dad's side is on the left, and the landscapes and images of them are kind of close up and a little bit, like this, right? And they go back in time. One of the reasons that I have been so interested in the family history, and since I was doing the the Hanging Family History and the Family History Wall was I became aware that each time I was making a triangle and writing someone's name on it, that was a person with a life. They had a full life with the same lives we have, like with hardships, with problems, with joys, with difficulties and accomplishments and all these things. And then as I put those together, I gained a perspective that made my life seem very small, and that the difficulties I had in my life were really no greater than any one of my ancestors had ever had. And so that was one of the reasons why I was looking into them and seeing how they lived, and that this whole manifestation of humanity through generations of time was something that meant a lot to me, and also that I learned a lot from. That, even when things are difficult, all I have to do is just like read a story from my family history and be happy that my ex-husband isn't building a huge house in front of mine or something like that. So this is, all part of life. This piece here I did when I was in Utah. I moved to Utah from New York City in 2006, and I taught at BYU for a year. This is called Jungle Totem, and this is a watercolor, and this is a personal timeline. So here I am, little me's, doing flips, jumping from tree to tree, going throughout my life. It's symbolic of the adventures and fun and goals and all the things that I had been doing and trying to achieve. And it's cut out and very closely cut out up to the point where I'm here standing on the tree, kind of looking up. And then it gets less cut out. And so that was about, at the time I was about 36 and thinking, well, here I am, and what's going to be left, and looking up at the trees up here. And then the paper is not cut out. So just symbolically, showing this movability of choices and things through life. And then on the ceiling there is the last piece going to autumn, I guess you could say. Maybe autumn, maybe the afterlife, not really sure. After I was teaching at BYU, I got a job with a social networking site in 2007. This is right when all that was starting. And so I started doing that, and it was a social networking site for artists and designers. And so I did most of the content and everything pretty much for it. But before I left New York, I was also asked to make a Christmas card. And so this is a Christmas card that I made for New Yorkers, basically, nativity, that you could just, store really easy, and that was beautiful and symbolic of Christ because it forms a cross, and the baby Jesus is in the middle, and you could mail this or keep this and store it in a drawer, and it was very efficient. So that's what I designed, and it sold well. And after I had worked for that company for a couple years, it was sold. And I had shares, so that was great. But I also had really devoted my entire 24/7 for a couple years, and it took a toll on my health. I was diagnosed with MS in 2009, and following that, a few months later, I was laid off from that job. And then 3 weeks after that, my mother died of a major stroke. And then a year after I was diagnosed with MS, I was in Midway, Utah, with some friends on a bike trip. Not really a bike trip, no. We were just staying in Midway, and we wanted to ride our bikes to the train, the train burger place there. And I got hit by a car on my bike. And I was not wearing a helmet. And I flew 40 feet and landed on the concrete and broke the lady's windshield, who was 85 and probably shouldn't have been driving. But so I had a tough year. And after that, with MS and a TBI, I was new to MS, so I didn't really know what was going on, and a TBI, traumatic brain injury. On top of that, it was a really difficult time. But I started a business, and I started heirloomware because I didn't, have that job, and so I made these holiday pieces out of my designs. From the nativity card and the nutcracker and a menorah and other things. And so that was back in 2009 or 10, actually. And so here we are 15 years later. I still am doing this. However, I am closing it up after this season. So come on in. So that's what I've been doing a lot of, but I have also still been making artwork. And I've been living in Salt Lake pretty much the rest of that time, with the exception of 3 years in Colorado. But this piece, after my mom died, this is a whole show kind of about my mother and my matriarchal line. And this was at the Rio Grande Gallery, downtown Salt Lake. So here is a painting that I did of my mother and her mother and myself, my mother, her mother, going back into time, having the visual information that I knew. And then you can see that there's writing down here. And I don't have their images. And it's kind of about just what I know of them and that line. This is called Handkerchief Totem. When I bought my grandmother's house, which I was able to do after working for that company, having it bought, I found this handkerchief collection. And this top one, I believe, is my great-grandmother's handkerchief. And then there's another one that's beautifully hand-embroidered. And then there's more that is embroidered down here. And this is what people would take with them to weddings, to funerals, even just carry around with them every day because they're nose round, that's just what they did. And then here there are some from the 60s that are more machine-made. And then here we have what we have now is our lovely Kleenex that we use all the time. And my grandma used them. She would always have them stuck in her, sleeves. So, but it was amazing to me how these, something that was kind of used and cherished and embellished, just become so run-of-the-mill and ordinary and disposable. This is a piece kind of about my mother. I don't think I'm going to go into this one. Well, maybe I will. This one is, So there's a scale, and then there's a monthly calendar and her bird clock. But I changed the faces. So instead of a bird clock, this is the scale, 0 to 90, capacity 300 pounds. This is her monthly book, but instead of days, they are hours of the day. That was the month that she died. And then in the scale, instead of the numbers, are the names of the people that she was keeping track of. And this is the name of this piece, Keeping Track. And so there's her 6 kids and her husband and her mother on there. And she weighed herself every single day and kept a record of it. I don't know why. Well, she didn't want to gain weight, but it was just something that she did. And so these are just items that she loved, that bird clock that she would continually, repeatedly refer to every day. Her calendar, her scale, her clock. And all of that was really revolving around the people that she loved in her life. This is her hanging family history, just hers. The other hanging family histories were both my mother and my dad, and obviously my mother's side doesn't have as much known information on it, but it does go back, quite a bit. This is laser cut steel, and this is another matriarchal line piece. So this is 10 generations going back of landscape and anecdotal stories and pictures of my mother's mother's mother. So at this time, I was 41 and not married and nothing on the horizon. I decided I still was like, okay, where are my, who's coming after me? So I decided to have some eggs frozen. And I told the doctor that I needed a picture of the eggs and I needed a picture blown up of the eggs. So these are my watercolor of my microscopic eggs that were frozen when I was 41, looking down at them, hopefully, to have someone else on the matriarchal line. So I did in between that piece and this piece, I did get married in 2015, and which was great. And then this is, though, we'll get back to that. This is another piece that I did of my Welsh side of my family. And so it was, one of the things that she brought over from Wales were 2 bolts of linen. And so I got a bolt of linen, and that's what I painted this piece on. And that's Laura Peters. She was the mother of Laura Loretta Woodland, who we referred to also with the woman in red on the column. And that's the bolts of linen. And her husband was William West Woodland, and he lassoed her. He was on a horse with his cousin, and there were 2 girls walking in front of them, and he said to his cousin, "So which girl do you want?" And his cousin said that to him, and he said, "I'll lasso the one I want." So he lassoed Laura Peters, and they had met before. She climbed on this horse, and they got married later on. So funny stories that are just unbelievable. So just nowadays, I feel like, I'm going back into time again here. Okay, so then after I was married, I obviously wanted to have children. And this was a journey that took me, that was over several years, that was disappointing. I had a couple miscarriages. We fertilized the eggs. None of them worked. And I was pretty darn devastated. And then this is when I was in Colorado, that was kind of a little bit of a healing place for me. So this is our bathroom that we're renovating. And this is just a typical scene from a woman that's a pregnancy test. And the result of that test can be extremely happy or extremely sad or terrifying or joyful. And it just depends on who's taking it and what time of life you're in. And so I just wanted to capture this moment of that kind of ritual, that private time that is happening in many women's lives. So this is that bathroom, and that's the series I did on infertility. This is a hanging family history, but after George Floyd's death, I came to the realization that if I had been born Black, I wouldn't have a hanging family history like I had, because Black people were not kept track of. They just weren't. The records weren't taken. This is like an equivalent descendant of James Manning James, who was one of the first Black women that was joined the church at the time of Joseph Smith. And so this would be an equivalent descendant of hers, and knowing that that would be what was known for that person. And that's actually pretty well known for a lot of Black people. But I felt like this was something that I wanted to express and And I never really thought of my piece as have anything to do with race, but I felt like there was this was a statement that I needed to make as well. This is a watercolor. We're not going to look at that one. This is the most recent piece that I did. This is at a faculty show at the UVU Museum of Art. And these are watercolors that are kind of going up the wall of dead bugs. So my brother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer a couple years ago. And at that time, he was in remission, and then he was misdiagnosed again, and we thought he had 2 to 11 months to live. And so this was a big shock to me. And I go on a lot of hikes with my dog, and at that time I just was noticing a lot of dead bugs, and so I would take pictures of them, and I just started watercoloring them. And then this is the piece that I ended up making. There's a lizard. It's not a bug, but little caterpillar. And I wanted to capture, even though these things were dead, they were really beautiful. I was just trying to capture the essence of what that was and life and what's left over after it. There's one that's framed, and it's also it's not a very good photograph, but it's a moth that's died there. And I kind of wanted these images to, like, the frame is like almost like maybe a casket, and then the other pictures are freer, that are, like traditional watercolors, but then I cut them out as they go farther away from that middle framed photo. Does that make sense? So here they are, and that's like a little cutout butterfly that, was dead, but looks like it's living now. And there's a moth up here at the very top of the wall, and then a dead snake, and that snail wasn't dead, but I wanted to include it anyway, because when you're an artist, you can just decide to do things like that. There isn't a single one that I haven't felt a connection to. And luckily, my family were very good record keepers. We have letters. We have a grandfather that wrote his biography and his family history, and other people have just written things and kept things. So I have a lot of recorded information to go from. I feel like I have had a lot of people watching me and are aware of what I'm doing. Also, the interest from people beyond. Also, I've felt gratitude from people. People just being remembered that haven't been remembered in a long time. Just being acknowledged.